Yeah, so thanks everyone for being here today. Happy to welcome you to this webinar on pricing organization. We will cover a variety of different topics and core challenges in pricing organization. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask them at any time. And we will be coming back to those at the end and have a 2 minutes or 5 minutes Q&A session as well. Should we start with a quick introduction of yourself, Ingo, as well?
Yeah. Sorry, I'm not. I can't find where I can activate your video. So to the audience, you have to see me twice. Hope that works for you. No, actually 3 times. So my name is Ingo. I'm a co-founder of Buynomics. Spent many years in pricing. Before founding Buynomics in price consulting, and we built or started Buynomics to actually bring pricing to the next level and digitize pricing decisions. Also today's topic is a bit broader. It's not focused on the software, but we will also look at the topic from a technological point of view. So I'm very excited about this topic, and I'm also very interested in your questions. We will have some time in the end for Q&A, and I'm happy to discuss the topics that you find relevant.
Perfect. If you can go to the next slide, I'll do a quick introduction of our company. So we are a forecasting company in the revenue management space. We've rolled out globally with our biggest customers, and they see pretty significant revenue improvement on average. We can come to some of the use cases later, but I'll leave it at that. You want to go to the next page? I think then I'll hand it over to you. This is the pricing framework, and this will serve as a bit of an orientation. And Ingo is going to focus today on the bottom aspect, as you can see, organization, the processes, incentives that are all part of the pricing infrastructure.
Cool. Thanks, Paul. So yeah, already start a bit into the topic, but let's spend 1 or 2 sentences while we're showing this. So today's topic is pricing organization. So essentially, from a more holistic pricing framework, this is constitutes the bottom of the pyramid. So at the top, you have your pricing strategy, what you want to achieve. Is it profit or revenue goals, for example? In the middle, you typically have the methods and tools to implement these strategies. So are you using value pricing or some other methods? How do you implement your pricing with your customers? And also, and then at the bottom, essentially the infrastructure on which all of this runs. So, and from our point of view, infrastructure includes, of course, tools. What we're building, I think this is going to be an increasing part of a pricing organization. The data that's used to make good decisions, of course, but also the organization, so the teams that you have, the structure of your pricing organization, and the processes essentially that run on these within these organizations, in your organizations, for example, and then also the incentives for the teams that are useful in helping the organization actually achieve the goals and increasing profitability or revenue, whatever the organization overall is aiming for. And this is what we want to talk to you about. And as I said before, we want to do that also because we are a technology company. In the background of the technological change that companies like ours are driving, and what implications we expect this to have on pricing organization. And of course, as I said, I'm very interested in your feedback, in your questions, and I'm looking forward to discussing these with you at the end of this webinar. So let's get started. So I think from our point of view, and I think most of this is well known, and we use this as a starting point for this discussion, is when you think about the organizational structure on the one hand, and then the processes, the pricing processes, so things like product innovations, list price changes, promotions, and so on that run on these organizations, you have this sort of dichotomy between the structure and then the flows, the processes that run on these. And from our point of view, I think there are three dimensions that are relevant for the organization. So a pricing organization can be very centralized. For example, you have a global company that sets pricing in one place for the whole organization, or you have, for example, a very decentralized company that has decentralized teams, pricing teams across countries or across industries, topics, and so on. I think this is one important distinction between organizations. And then you have, I think, from our point of view, a further important dimension is whether what we call the customer focus. So do you treat all of your customers separately? For example, your existing customers and your new customers, are they being priced differently, also organizationally different, or are they all treated within one organization? This is something that says a lot about the pricing organization overall. And then I think what's very relevant as a third dimension is whether you have a number of pricing tasks that are closely related to the processes. So you have to evaluate product innovations, what innovations are useful for improving your profitability, for example. Should you change your prices to optimize your portfolio? How do you react to competitor price changes and so on? And then in the end, how do you set customer specific prices, for example, using different types of promotions, using discounts, or any other bundling, for example, any other methods. So there's a bunch of tasks that are relevant for the pricing organization. And the key question is, how do you work with these? So do you integrate all of these functions so that you have decisions on the portfolio made in together with decisions on pricing and trade terms, for example, or are these different topics split and separate across the industry, across different teams? And these are the things we want to discuss today, and also how technology drives maybe trends within these organizational frameworks. But I think this is a very useful way of looking at a pricing organization along these three dimensions, and then thinking about the processes that run on these. To make this a bit more specific, we have, based also on our experience, put in some examples. So for example, something like a software company in terms of pricing is typically very centralized. You have a more homogeneous customer base also across different countries. And for example, in this case, where product innovation are much easier to change. So if you have a software, for example, that consists of different features, it's much easier to change a feature in a software than it is to change properties of a car or any physical product. So these price and feature decisions are typically much more aligned with each other. On the other spectrum, you have something like, for example, consumer goods companies, and they tend to have these different tasks, product innovation, marketing, and sales, much more separated along the pricing task dimension at the bottom. And of course, for consumer goods companies, it's much more difficult also to separate between, for example, existing and new customers than it is for an insurance company, for example. But even for consumer goods companies, you see that they tend, where it's possible, to offer different product variations for more of their new customers, where they maybe want to attract a new customer with a small package size, whereas for the existing companies, customers, they want to bind them to their product maybe with a larger pack to make sure that they don't switch to a competitor when the competitor has a promotion. So even there, you have a distinction between existing and new customers, but it's much weaker than for example, in a software or insurance or in any other repeat business. what drives, if we go to the first, as an example, to the first dimension, what drives something like centralization or decentralization in an organization? I think it's very straightforward to think about that. So you have a more centralized pricing organization when, for example, the data are more standardized. So you have the same data structure. For example, you gather data from Google, and that has the same structure across the globe for you. And you have standardized products that work very similarly across all your markets, or you have even international customers that you meet in different countries. That's something that speaks very strongly for a centralized organization. And some of the benefits, I think, are also very clear. It's easier to concentrate capabilities, have a very, very strong central team in the organization, and then apply that knowledge across all of your products. These are clear advantages of centralization, whereas you tend to have a more decentralized organization when, for example, you have very strong differences between markets, between distribution channels in different markets, between customer needs, also between regulations in different countries. Then it's very, very difficult to have a centralized organization because it has difficulties understanding the country specifics and being properly prepared for the decentralization. So, and this is something that helps you, for example, with a very close customer support, people on the ground close to the customer that understand the local needs and are able to map these. Also, one thing that's helpful, I think a little bit unintuitive in the first place in a decentralized organization, is that you have you can try out many more different experiments across different markets or different countries. And because you have different needs, you can easily try out different things. And with that, have the opportunity to learn quicker what works and what doesn't work. And if you're then to some extent also able to spread these insights across the organization. So how to work with these? And I think in our experience, there are three key challenges that need to be addressed in the organization, and also with the processes that run on these within the organization. And these are the responsibilities in the pricing organization. So who makes what decisions and based on what competencies. Then there's, if you have a larger organization, there's always the key question of coordination. So you have people working on product features, you have people defining the trade terms, you have people setting prices, and how do these things all work together very well? That's a very difficult question, and one where we often see in our experience that it's not addressed perfectly, I would say. And then the last point is incentives. So how do you get people motivated, incentivized to follow the objectives of the organization? And these are the three topics that we want to discuss now on top of the structure that we laid out so far. So the first one, the challenge of responsibility, and we have put this here in a very simplified way. So as everyone knows, in pricing, price, volume, and also product features are very closely related. And what we see in many organizations is that responsibilities between different departments are not properly split or take account of this. So you have people responsible for setting prices, and then you have people maybe in marketing, and then you have teams in sales responsible for sales volumes, but they don't have the full authority on the price, or they have authority on setting discounts to their customers. And there are some potential tensions between the departments. So you have in marketing setting prices, and then sales concluding, well, with these prices, there's no way we can reach our sales goals. And therefore we use our discounts not to distinguish between different customer needs, but to correct, in a sense, the pricing that was set by marketing. And with that, you have a number of potential conflicts between different teams and with different responsibilities. And I think the key, and you have this between price, volume, obviously, also product features. So if you build a better product, then this shifts here the demand function. But you also have it between promotions, discounts, trade terms, and so on. And in almost all organizations that I've seen, I've see that this is a potential source of conflict, and something that would help the organization a lot if it's addressed properly. And this is one of our hypotheses that we see, is that that technology like the one that we're building, for example, can actually contribute to solving this issue, in the sense that the technology that we are building allows teams to get a very clear view on the interaction between price, volume, product features, promotions, and everything else. And you have the ability with a solution like that to optimize holistically the solution, your offer, in terms of profit optimization or revenue optimization. And you can then also, and this is one of the trends that we are also expecting, is that you have a trend towards aggregation of decision making and responsibilities. So from a separation of responsibilities for price and volume, for example, towards a responsibility for profit, and that includes the fine-tuning of price and volume and using their specific relationship. So this is one of the trends that that we expect with the spread of pricing technology like the one that we're building. Let's go into a further topic, the challenge of coordination. And here we're looking at a different industry, automotive, and the case of new product design. So a new vehicle is being built, but it's very similar in other industries everywhere, where you have the challenge of developing a certain product, which might take a longer period of time. And then you have different decisions along the way. And I think we're using the auto example here because the product development in automotive is particularly long. And because of the physical nature of the product, you have to make certain decisions very early on when you decide on engines, on certain design features, and so on. You have to decide these things many years before start of production. And that leads to a situation where in the status quo, what we're seeing many times is that many of these decisions are made with very limited and skewed information, in the sense that, for example, costs are considered in the beginning when you decide, do we include a certain feature in the base model where we can purchase much larger volumes and get a better price, or do we include some features only in the more high-end models? And so you have information on the cost, you have information on your expected sales volume in the long-term planning, but you don't consider the market view. You don't, at this point, many companies don't consider, so how would that influence the sales split between different products, my base model and the more high-end models, if I include a certain feature across the whole product or just in the high-end models, or how does it affect my profitability if I use different engines within my model range? So, and what we're saying is that in the status quo, many of these decisions are not integrated, and many of these decisions are made very early with very limited information, because it's very difficult to look at this holistically, consider the customer reaction very early on, having a proper model in the beginning. And that's something where we see that it's very difficult to coordinate. And I think in a more pre-technology era where many companies are still within pricing, the typical solution is disintegration, that you say, okay, let's first answer the questions that we have to answer early on, with limited information, and then move from there. And from our experience, that's the path that's typically taken is something that no one really likes. So no one says, okay, this is as good as it can get, but this is just how it is because of the limited technological capabilities. And that's something, I think, where a solution like ours, and we've demonstrated this already in a number of examples, can really help by helping an organization build a realistic market model based on historical data, based on different data sources, and integrating them in a market simulation early on, where you can, in this auto example, in the very beginning, already assess the effects, for example, of changing different engine types, changing different features in the vehicle based on a market view. So how would a change in engines affect profitability? How would it change the split between different vehicles in the product range, and so on? So you have transparency from the very beginning in this process. And this is something that we very strongly expect technology to enable companies, and that's also something where we expect that this is going to be used much more broadly. We certainly hope that it will. Maybe in a simpler example, to make it more tangible. So here we have, and this is also an example of the integration of some pricing decisions that currently are typically made in separation. So for example, you have here, and this is a dummy example, you have 4 products. You have peanut butter, 250 gram, 500, 700, 1000. And the question is, how useful would, for example, be a price change, and how useful would be the addition of a further product in the product range? So in this case, a new weight. And would it be better to add a new product, or would it be better to replace existing products with a new product? And typically today, these questions are answered separately. So how would a change in the portfolio affect profitability, for example, and how would a price change affect profitability? And with a solution like ours, it's very easy and straightforward. And that's something that currently teams can, from different departments, can work on together, that you have transparency over these different options. So the status quo, what's the profitability of the status quo? How would it be affected if you just have a price change? What's the effect if you change the portfolio at a new product without prices? And then what's the effect of a combined price and product change? And in this example, you see that would be the most profitable option. And it's an option that very often is essentially inaccessible to the organization, because it's very difficult to simulate these effects. So, and that's something that we expect very strongly to be enabled now with the right technology. Then the third topic, incentives. And in setting incentives, I think there are a number of key challenges. So, for example, what's the right baseline? What can you expect from someone in the team to achieve in sales? How much sales can you achieve? And how do you reward that? So, and if you look, for example, here on the left side in the graph, you see that, and this I think is very typical of many situations. You have here as a driving factor the sales volume, and often the first sales, or 80% of the sales, are very, very simple and actually don't require incentivation or an excessive incentivation, but getting the last 20%, or getting the sales expectation to 110, 120%, that's really challenging. And this is something that should be considered by setting up a proper incentive system, is, for example, how difficult it is. But for this, you need to know as an organization what the baseline is, what's easy in this example, what's difficult. You also need to understand who contributed what to the benefit in the organization. And this is often also a very difficult question to answer. And as you saw in the previous example, with the right technology, it becomes much more accessible. So you can see, okay, we increased our profit by 10%, and X% of that came from the new product innovation, and Y% came from the price improvement. So with technology like this, it becomes accessible and then to evaluate who contributed what to, and what feature or what initiative contributed what to the benefit. And that's helpful in defining the proper baseline and identifying who contributed what to the overall benefit. Also, what you often see in the context of incentives is that the risk and rewards are not properly aligned. That means there are two things to this. What you don't want as an organization is that, for example, in sales, people gamble, that they have an incentive to increase the standard deviation of their success because they get excessively incentivized for very large successes. And for them, it might be reasonable, but not for the organization. So there might be a difference. And another issue is that if, for example, if you're in an organization has a couple hundred sales reps and you have an incentive system that incentivizes them not to take too many risks. So that means that for them, it's better to be a bit cautious. So for example, in this case here, it's better to aim for the 80% rather than the 110, 120%, because that maximizes their utility, their expected return. Whereas for the organization, it would be much better if everyone went for the 100 or 110%. And this is also something where the organization, it's much easier for the organization to take the proper risk, because it diversifies across the sales team and can better work with the risk in this case. Final point, alignment responsibility. Of course, you can only incentivize someone for something that person has control over. So this is the final, I think, challenge here. And in summary, again, here we think that technology can help here. I pointed out the point on defining the proper baseline, also aligning responsibilities. That's something, as we saw before, that where technology can help a lot. So we expect with more technology to help organizations to better steer and also be able to set better incentives for their sales team, and then as an organization benefit from that. So to summarize, I think what we're seeing is, and we're looking at this a bit from the technology side, we're seeing three key trends that affect pricing organizations. So the first one is, as we showed, is that technology allows to have a more holistic view, and allows you to make product, price, and sales volume decision together. And I think this is something that will lead to a stronger integration of responsibilities. So more towards revenue management in organizations, and revenue management meaning that you have someone responsible across product, price, and sales in the end. This is one thing we expect. We also expect, as you saw, something what we call the democratization of advanced modeling capabilities. So if you have a tool that does all the difficult math for you, then it enables the organization to spend more time on strategic and creative skills rather than doing the number crunching in Excel or any other more manual tool. I think that's something that's very attractive to many organizations. And the last one, the incentive point we just spoke about, is that technology allows you to set proper and fair baselines, and with that puts you in a position to better steer your organization. So we expect that proper incentives will play a much more important role in pricing organizations with the spread of pricing technology.
Thanks,
So
Ingo.
This was just in time. I don't know if Paul, if you have questions or if we still have time for answers. Otherwise, I would say that we put these in our answers in the email.
Yeah.
And not take more of your time than we promised we would.
Yeah, I mean, I would suggest. I saw your question, Ali, on whether we can send the slides. If you want us to send the slides, we can do that. Just tell us in the chat or on LinkedIn in the event, and we'll send it to you. for anyone who wants to stick around, I think we have some also very interesting content answers. Ingo, if you have like 2 minutes, we can address those as well. And for everyone who doesn't have a sharp deadline in the next minutes, then maybe they can stick around as well. So the first question is, once you arrive at an optimum price, how do you move it into the ERP, especially SAP? That's Barry Edney asking. So basically, I think he's asking, okay, in terms of the software, how can we actually make it so that it's in the ERP and helps you price your products in the existing software?
Yeah. So different ways are from when you only have to set, I don't know, 5 or 6 prices in a small portfolio, you can just do it manually, to you can hook it up via an API and have that automatically.
Perfect. Next question is, how have you seen pricing skills develop in the last 10 years, and how will that change in the next 10 years? I think that relates a bit to the question on skills, right?
Yeah. I think that's a good question. I think that relates a bit to the to one of the trends that we're expecting. I think what we expect is, or what we saw in the past years was an increase of analytical skills. So in Excel or R, MATLAB, some or Stata, some more advanced tools to be able to model something like or identify something like a price elasticity. These are things that I've seen a lot in the past years. I think, as we said, that the next wave might put some more emphasis on more strategic or creative skills, because many of these things, many of the analytical parts can be done by software. So and teams that have a different focus, or it allows teams to also put a different focus on more on these strategic or creative skills. So I think we will see more of an emphasis on the not purely analytical capabilities.
Okay, quite fascinating. And the last question was, when do you see this technology future become reality? So I guess the question here is, when do you think every company will get the most out of this potential of software that we see today?
Yeah, I think it's going to be May 3rd. No, so I don't think there's going to be like a specific date. I think, and this is what we're working on. It has already started, and I think this is going to turn into a broader movement or a trend over the coming decades. I think this is going to be probably the dominating force for this decade and the following one. So it would be very strange if pricing wouldn't move towards more digitalization and more advanced capabilities as the technology that we're building right now.
Perfect. I think that's all from the Q&A at this point. I saw some people were interested in the slides, so you'll get these by email. Everyone will receive, I think, from Zoom an email with the recording as well. So if you thought this was interesting, you can share it with friends and colleagues. Also note, I think, Ingo, we have the next webinar on pricing strategy coming up. So that's basically the top of the pricing organization pyramid. That's, I think, also quite fascinating and relevant for a lot of pricing executives. So that will be on February 12th. That's in 3 weeks. And we'll do another LinkedIn event for that. And if you are in our newsletter, then you'll receive an invitation as well. And we'll post it on LinkedIn just to remind you. But I think at this point, thanks everyone for sticking around as well for this extra Q&A. I wish you all a good weekend. Let's stay in touch. And if you have any further questions, don't hesitate to send us an email or get in touch on LinkedIn. And we'll be happy to talk a bit more about pricing organization or any other questions that you have.
Yeah.
So thanks a lot.
Thank you very much for your interest. Also, if you have ideas on topics that we might discuss next, very open to these. As you saw here, what we did was a 6-part webinar series. We wanted to cover all the key topics, not just the pure software and core pricing topics, but also something like today, pricing organization. Of course, we have one more on pricing strategy, and after that, we want to start a new series. And if you have any ideas, anything you find interesting, think we might have something to say on that, please let us know, as we're now in the phase where we're designing the next webinar series following February 12th, and that should bring us to the summer. So thank you very much for your attention. Have a good weekend, and we're looking forward to seeing you in the next webinar. So thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great weekend.